Hey YouTube, I'm going to go over the tips and tools I use to get a perfect score on the CASPer 3 times in a row. Let me explain myself. I wrote the CASPer 3 times. This is because I applied to medical school twice. Once right after my sophomore year and once right after my junior year. So I tried to kind of skip a year the first time. Canadians do that, so don't judge me too much. But I wrote it 3 times. The first time I wrote it for Canada, the Canadian medical schools I was applying to, and the second time for both Canada and the US. The second time I applied, I was successful to both Canada and the US, and now I'm a medical student at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. So everything worked well for me, and one critical component of getting into certain schools was my CASPer, so it's important to do well on this test. Now let's get into the tricks. The first big trick was turning on the closed captions. So when I see the captions, that really helps me take better notes. Also, a big thing is you see the people's names. So it might say like Alex, Jane, Mustafa, whatever names you're using in the scenario. This is really helpful because for those video scenarios where there's like a video playing, sometimes they don't say the person's name, or maybe they say just once and now you're like, shit, what was their name, right? So you forget it. If you turn on closed captions, it'll keep saying like their name, then a colon, then what they say, right? So you can write down their names, and then in your answers, you can talk about them using their names. I'm assuming like a lot of applicants aren't doing this, right? They're saying, oh, the manager or the lady in the red or something like that. But now you can just say, Alex said this, Jane said this. That's gonna make you stand out by making you look like you're more attentive. The second thing I did was I would write notes on cue cards. So I had 12 cue cards, 15 cue cards, one for each scenario. I'll write down the names, and for each single name, I write down like what they think and their perspectives right under it. That is how I would organize my notes. I would be writing notes while the video was playing, and then in the 30 seconds where I have to think, I would write even more notes. And I kind of like try to predict what the next question would be. Like, what would the first question be? It's usually like, what would you do in the scenario, or what do you advise this person to do? So I would start getting, thinking ahead of the ethical scenarios that could be asked of me, or the ethical questions based on that scenario during that 30-second thinking period. The third huge tip for me was to rehearse the line I was gonna say for my video response questions. So as you know, the new CASPer has video responses. You're not always typing your answers. Sometimes you're speaking it to the camera. A big thing is a lot of people, you only have 10 seconds to read that little question and then think of an answer and start saying it. A lot of people, they see the video turn on themselves and start stumbling, fumbling over their words. It's a mess. For me, in that 10 seconds, I would make sure the first few words I said were rehearsed, right? I would quickly practice them. So the first sentence I said, was super confident, super dominant, to leave an amazing first impression, right? So first impressions matter a lot, and if you can leave a first impression, you're already halfway there. Everybody's saying the same thing, like more or less, everyone's saying the same stuff. The difference is you had a great start by saying stuff confidently and dominantly, so you left a good first impression. So you're already ahead of, half the pack just by saying normal stuff, but saying it in a confident manner to gain that first impression. Tip 4 would be to zoom out. Now, I don't know if this is my computer's fault, but sometimes I just wouldn't see the question, or it would be too low and I'd have to scroll down. And for those video scenarios where, it's showing you, then at the bottom, you see the question for like 10 seconds. Dude, that was crazy because sometimes I wouldn't see it and I have to scroll, and I'm wasting part of that 10 seconds that I have to read and think of my answer. Right, I'm wasting it scrolling. So zoom out or use a computer with a big monitor on test day. That is going to be helpful. Maybe they'll fix that for future revisions of the test, but for now, my small computer screen kind of, led me to those troubles. So I would have to zoom out, and that really helped me make things go smooth. Now, tip number 5 is to use kind of a strategy and not use one of those frameworks. So there's a framework a lot of people use, the PPRDJ framework. First, you talk about the problem, then the perspectives. This is fine, right? This is a great way to approach problems. I'm not gonna take it down. The thing is, if everybody's using that, then no one's standing out. And a lot of people, they have this template of a script they're gonna write in their head, and every time they see a question, they morph the scenario into this template. Whereas if you pay attention, sometimes the scenario needs you to pay more attention to empathy or problem solving. There's different ideas for different scenarios going on, and you can't have this strict template in your head you're gonna follow. The best way is to have a strategy for approaching those questions instead of this template that you follow in general. And a strategy is built by simply doing a lot of practice questions that come with answers, expert answers that you can practice with. Now, the 6th tip is to not be a detective, and I say this because sometimes, there's shady stuff going on, right? Something's missing from the fridge, something's like someone's coming in without a receipt trying to return something. They say, oh, I need it for like this, that reason. Your job as a future professional is not to just be doubtful of people, you think that they're lying, and you don't want to use the time to answer, you don't want to use it trying to figure out if the person's telling the truth or not. Your job is to show empathy, to give the benefit of the doubt as much as you can, right? Within reason, and just think of, charitable, compassionate, empathetic ways to help that person instead of being a detective trying to see if that person's telling the truth, which in the real world, right, because not everything's black and white in the real world, not everybody's good, we would be thinking like, okay, let me make sure this person's telling the truth to me. But no, the CASPer is really just judging your problem-solving skills in terms of showing compassion and all the different interpersonal qualities that the CASPer is meant to assess. And number 6, and this is kind of like, this might be different for you, but for me, it's to dress well and dress nice and be confident in how you look. So of course, they're most likely, I'm hoping they're trained to not have biases against how you look, right? But the thing is, there's video answers now. There are going to be people that look at you, and if you're dressed all sloppy, you don't really care, it's not going to leave a good impression in terms of when they're looking at you. So what I do is I wore my dress shirt, I had pants on, I had shoes on, I put on cologne, right? They can't smell me through the damn camera, but what it helped me do was be myself, be confident, and I'm only gonna, you can only write the CASPer one time per cycle, or take it one time per cycle, so I wanted to be as confident as possible so I could give a strong answer, and part of that was how I dressed and felt about myself. Learn to touch type. Touch typing is when you don't look at the keyboard when you're typing, and this is because a lot of scenarios in the CASPer have text-based responses, right? And if there's me who can type at 100 words per minute versus someone who can only type at 40, I'm gonna get more of my thoughts down within that 5-minute period than they can, right? So it's a sad thing, right? Because it's not really testing how ethical I am, but I can get more ideas, more alternatives, more thoughts, perspectives down just because I can type faster. Also, when I have my notes that I've written, I can look at my notes and just type instead of looking back and forth, which helps me save double the time. So learn how to touch type, it's gonna be huge for you. That's about it, guys. If you want practice for the CASPer, I highly recommend a website I helped create called thebrightdoctor.com. It has over 100 CASPer scenarios with expert answers for each of the questions. It also comes with tips that go beyond, right, how to stand out with other applicants, and it has red flags to avoid, because sometimes, you might be saying something that's kind of a red flag. You don't want to say that in a CASPer test. It's not too ethical. Make sure you check that out. There's text-based scenarios, there's video-based scenarios, over 100 total, like I said. I scored perfect 3 times, and I helped create this, along with other medical students who scored very well. So I highly recommend this resource. There's 10 free questions. You can check it out in the bio, thebrightdoctor.com. And good luck on your test. I'll see you guys in the next one.